Good afternoon, everybody, and let's get started. And I want to welcome everyone to the September 4th hearings before the Baltimore Municipal and Zoning Appeals Board. Few preliminary items. Please turn off all cell phones, or at least turn them to vibrate. And if you have a need to have a conversation with anyone, please take it out in the hallway. And the reason being that cell phones and other devices and conversations are not only disruptive to the hearings that are taking place here, but they also interfere with the microphones and the audio and video recordings that are being made here. We have a few postponements. I will read those out now. If you're here for one of those cases, and if you have not signed in, please do so. You'll be notified when the case comes back before us. The first case that is postponed is 2018-282, 1700 Utah Place, and 26 South Catherine Street. So if anyone is here for either one of those cases, please, if you haven't signed in, please do sign in. We're going to call the cases generally as they appear on the docket, although I say that today we are going to move things around a little bit to try to facilitate our docket. When we call your case, the appellant will stand to my left, and if there's any opposition will stand to my right. The appellant will present his or her argument. The opposition will have the opportunity to state their position, and then we will give the appellant the opportunity to close, and that will end the hearing. We will vote on the appeals today at the end of the hearing, and anyone who would like to stay to listen to our decision certainly may. If you don't decide that you want to stay here on a beautiful, warm afternoon, you can call the zoning office tomorrow morning and hear our decision. And Derek, if you'll read out that number, I would appreciate it.
410-396-4301. 410-396-4301.
Great. Please do not build in Baltimore City without a permit. Our written decision will be issued within a few weeks after we make a decision. First, I want to address the situation where we have opposition to a case. We have found that sometimes if the parties talk, things can get resolved and it makes the hearing process a little easier. And we want to give that opportunity to the parties today. I do note, though, however, that while we encourage dialogue between the parties, the board makes the ultimate decision. So we have opposition signed in for 2018-273, Carl Nunn. Would you stand up, Mr. Nunn, as well as your opposition?
The opposition.
You're the opposition. Mr. Nunn? Well, you're certainly not going to have a dialogue, so why don't you have a seat? 2018-281, 3309 Liberty Heights Avenue. Carlton Gilbert. Mr. Gilbert? Yes. And is this the opposition with you? Yes. Would you guys like to have the opportunity to talk a little bit?
I've had an opportunity, sir, to speak to opposition from 2 civic associations, and we've agreed to postpone it until probably October.
Okay. So 2018-281, 3309 Liberty Heights Avenue is postponed, and you'll contact Mr. Baumgartner regarding the date.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We have one other case where I understand there is a postponement requested, and that postponement will be challenged, and that is 2018-72, 1401 to 1407 Woodall Street. So I'm just going to ask council to come up for the sole purpose of talking about the postponement.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joe Woolman. I'm representing the applicant in this matter.
John C. Murphy. I'm representing the opposition.
It's come to our attention literally within the last couple of hours that a letter was submitted by one of the important stakeholders in the neighborhood of this proposed project, that being Domino Sugar, requesting that the board consider, if they do approve the request, several conditions, some of them as serious as recording covenants, et cetera. We would like to, and have, I think, demonstrated in the past, work with the stakeholders in the area and work with Domino Sugar to find out what, if any, of these requests we can we can agree to with Domino, and for that reason, we'd like at least the opportunity. We can't address these within the hour. The architect in this matter would need to consider a lot of these design requests. The architect wasn't even planning on attending today. We've got the engineer and the developer and an expert here, but the architect isn't even available to discuss this. I had discussed this with my client. He is willing to take the time to try to meet with Domino and address address these issues, which are, again, the letter, which we wouldn't have a copy of if I didn't check the board's file this morning. We weren't copied on this letter. Apparently was sent Friday. The conditions are fairly significant and detailed. The letter requests that the board consider these conditions if they're going to approve our request, so therefore they're very paramount to the case, and we'd like an opportunity to respond and hopefully work with Domino and agree to meet the conditions. We just can't, on the record today, state that absolutely without the opportunity to review them, discuss them with our design team, et cetera. And then, as the board is well aware, this is our application and our request, and although it's been postponed in the past at the behest of a councilman, et cetera, to continue to work with the community in this matter, I know the board's practice is generally to permit the applicant to proceed as the applicant sees fit. I recognize that this is not the first postponement, but I would also indicate that the previous postponements were requested at the behest of the councilman and the community as we continue to try to resolve, this frankly fairly contentious matter.
Mr. Chairman, we adamantly oppose the request. We must have 30 people here who've taken off from work, come to this hearing, and to make the request, at the day of the hearing is a real hardship on them. They've lost their time at work. They've come here. We want to go ahead. This case has been discussed with the applicant and the community for months, so it's nothing new. This is something that has been worked over, so we don't see any point to the request for postponement. Mr. O'Malley's here from Domino Sugar. Do you have anything to add?
I do. Mr. Chairman, the Domino Sugar is here to oppose this appeal, and nothing that was in that letter that was filed with the board on Friday changes that or the nature of the appeal that the owner is here for. So we're here to oppose.
And we certainly recognize that Domino is opposed in principle to the request. However, their letter states specific conditions that they're asking the board to consider if the board considers approval of this request. We need to be given the opportunity. As Mr. Murphy says, it's a hardship for us to ask for this postponement, but frankly, it's a hardship to have a letter asking the board consider specific conditions to approval that, frankly, we would have even gotten if I didn't check to see if anything was submitted last minute. And I think we deserve the opportunity, especially given my client's history of the attempts that he's made to work with the community in this matter, to have this opportunity to try to work with Domino Sugar.
I understand there's a lot of people here today, and it is difficult to get down here. There's parking involved. There's taking time off of work. I think what concerns me is that Mr. Woolman did not receive a copy of the letter, and I'm inclined to grant the postponement, but I'm going to have the board tell me their votes on this as well. Do you agree on a postponement? Yes?
Yeah.
I think under the circumstances, it would be appropriate.
I agree on postponement.
Okay. Case is postponed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Again, if you were signed in opposition to the case, you will be notified as to when it goes back on the docket. Our office will notify you.
Please just make note of everybody standing up and walking out in opposition to this in case we cannot make it to the next meeting. Please.
Okay, next we're going to call, excuse me, a series of cases. Excuse me. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. That are a little out of order on the docket, but these are all related cases. These are hardship extension requests. And It's all sort of, they all sort of have the same issue. Thank you.
Doing the hardships for the How are we doing these, Chair? Do we do them individually like Derek?
We're going to call each one of these.
We need to do the consents first?
We don't have to. We'll do these first.
Okay.
So with all these cases, and we're going to call each one individually, but in all these cases, there are certain criteria that the owner of the business needs to meet. And our hands are tied in terms of discretion here. So it's either you purchased, these are for non-conforming uses where you purchased a property after January 1st, 2008 and before April 1st, 2012. You've invested capital improvements in the property in excess of $100,000 after June 30th, 2007 and before April 1, 2012, or you've entered into a lease before April 1, 2012 that has a term remaining in excess of 10 years, and it's not terminable by the lessee because of a change in zoning. So we're going to call these cases, and we're going to ask you to address which one of those criteria or more fits your case. So the first case is 300 South Highland Avenue, Jason T. Venturi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As you said, my name's Jason Vittori with Smith, Gilday and Schmidt, and I'm here on behalf of the property owner Charlotta Perek,
Okay.
who's seated behind me in the third row over here. And Ms. Perek, I think as I outlined in my reasons for hardship extension, which was a page and a half of single-space stuff, the initial thing is obviously, I think preserving the issue of constitutionality of this provision. I don't expect you to rule in my favor, but I just merely want to preserve that issue.
Noted.
Second is the letter dated, I guess it was the initial letter we got from DHCD, which notified Ms. Perek that her license would expire, or her ability to operate this business would expire in 2019, and that was because she was deemed to be a non-conforming use. That is in fact not the case. I think I confirmed with Katie Byrne. I don't know if Ms. Byrne's here today, but I spoke to her in advance of this hearing. Excuse me, I have my sunglasses on my head. And Ms. Byrne acknowledged that the property was zoned business B22 previously, and when the property zoning was changed, was in the comprehensive rezoning. And as a result, that means under the law, and an earlier provision there of the zoning code, that she should be extended to 2020. So that is not getting any hardship. That is just merely what the law matches up with, that the prior zoning, it shifted in the comprehensive rezoning. So it should be at least till June 4th or 5th, 2020.
Okay.
And the third thing, and I just want to give you some exhibits, and I understand there's the three pillars of what we can actually do. As far as, this history of this property, Ms. Perek has they entered into a lease, I think it's 2015 for 5 years, or 2017 for 5 years. And as far as that lease with a friend of her husband's, it all came about as a result of the fact that her brother was shot and killed at this property back in 2015. So it was apparently, and this is in May of 2015, I'm going to mark as Exhibit 1, who's got, Derek, you taking these? Sure. Thanks. This is just an article. I can give you guys all a copy, or if you'd rather just
Whatever you want to
proffer
do.
what's in there. I think just putting the one in instead of dragging this out so I can get the exhibits in and we can move on. Next is another article that has a picture of her brother that was shot and killed at the property. And this was from the following month. Thank you. Or July of 2015. So those two, and I'm going to mark as 3, which is a resolution from the city acknowledging, that they should investigate this killing that happened right in the wake of the Freddie Gray aftermath. And as 4 from the General Assembly, I know Ms. Mikulski was a friend of the business and would come in frequently. And then 5, I'm going to mark as something from the former mayor, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, memorializing passing this individual and the need to investigate. And last, or second to last, this is a petition form that went around to the community to find social justice for Joe, who the gentleman who was shot and killed. As far as how many community letters of signatures, it's, I don't know how many pages exactly it is, but suffice to say, there was a lot of individuals that signed to have him come and hopefully solve this mystery. I think, so obviously what we're trying to do is get a hardship extension from 2020, which is, as I understand how the law reads now, to 2022, the additional 2 years. And if we don't get that, or even if we do, ultimately, I think there's a provision, and we've added in this a request for conditional use approval, which the board has the ability to grant, and that would be to consider this property to be a neighborhood commercial establishment. And if it was to be deemed a neighborhood commercial establishment, which is only eligible for properties such as this that have been downzoned and are losing this ability here, to be one of 7 uses: an art gallery, art studio, daycare center, adult or child, offices, personal services establishment, restaurant, or retail goods establishment. So I think.
Without the
she's-
sale of alcohol, though?
Without the sale of alcohol, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not trying to overstep that aspect of the law by any means. But I think, in the event that somehow she's ultimately going to lose this thing that has value to her, I think getting ahead of things today and making sure she gets a conditional use approval would save her the time from coming back in the future.
I'll have to talk to zoning board staff. That may be a separate application. We'll have to talk about that.
Okay. And if you have any questions for Ms. Parekh, I think obviously the family's gone through quite a bit. And, this is, public policy reasons aside, which is not your department, I understand where we are. And I think with that, thank you.
Great. Any questions from the board? No. Thank you very much. Next case is 745 North Fulton Avenue, and I'm going to not do this name correctly. Gebretanse G. Mengistieb. How are you? How badly did I do on the name? Okay.
Mr. Kandaski. Help him.
Are you asking someone to come up?
What's in the crowd?
Do we have counsel now?
I didn't file the appeal, so I'm not sure that he has the answers to the questions that you're asking as to whether or not he qualifies for that. So I didn't file the appeal, so I know I did the settlement form, so that's probably why he's looking to me.
Are you going to represent him before this hearing? Are you going to act as his counsel here?
He didn't ask me to, so
Would the two of you like to step out and just,
I probably would ask to get a postponement, because I'm handling a bunch of other cases similar to this, but not this one.
since you're not counsel, if the appellant wants to ask for a postponement, we'll grant that?
Ask for a postponement, yeah. Okay.
Okay, postponement has been asked for and granted, and we'll notify you when it comes back.
Call me tomorrow.
Great, thank you very much. Next case is 1141 Poplar Grove Street, Robert H. Kim. Come on up. How are you?
Hello, sir.
Good. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Robert Kim.
Great. And Mr. Kim, you heard what I said about the three criteria that you have to show us. Can how do you want to handle it? How do you want to go about this?
I could go with the 100,000, but I don't have any proof.
We're going to ask for documentation.
Yes.
If you would like to postpone so that you can bring us documentation, we would grant that postponement.
I don't have a proof, even if you postpone it.
You don't have any proof?
No.
Would you like to describe what you did to the property?
I think about 9 years ago I did electrical work that costed like 4,000. The roof was 2,000. There's only two that I can remember top of my head. There's a couple other ones, but I don't keep receipts that long. So.
Okay. Sir, did you want to add something?
Yes.
And
my name is Theron Black. I'm president of the Winchester Association in the 17 blocks.
Yeah,
I just didn't get your first name.
Theron Black.
Spell it.
Theron Black.
And I did neglect to get you guys sworn in, so let me get you sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm the raise your right hands, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Go ahead.
My turn?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna make it real fast. You know, Mr. Kim, very good part of our community. You know, the Winchester Association, we have 17 blocks in that area. I'm gonna sum it real up. From Belmont to Winchester and to Emerson Avenue and Poplar Grove, that's part of the Winchester Association. We're getting ready to lose stores on Belmont because they sell liquor and they also have a grocery store. We're getting ready to do, Mr. Kim, which is Winchester and Poplar Grove, and Lafayette, and you see how close they are even together. Lafayette and Poplar Grove, we're getting ready to use No Rush. Emerson Avenue and Poplar Grove, Jerry's. We're getting ready to lose all these stores. But one thing about all these stores that they do have for our community, the older people and stuff, they...
And I don't mean to interrupt you, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, but we've got 3 criteria. That's what we have to find, that you purchased the property after January 1, that $100,000 was invested between June 30th, 07 and April 2012, or there's a lease in excess of 10 years that you can't terminate because of a zoning change.
Understand
That's,
that.
unless one of the, Mr. Kim can show us one of them, we can't grant the hardship.
So this is the situation we're in now. See, because just like I say, Mr. Kim, as I can already see, didn't keep real good records of actually what he actually done. So now we even need someone to kind of come and explain, because some of these things, because how long have you actually been here? How long have you been in that building?
13 years.
13 years that he's actually been around, and I'm quite sure over the 13 years, because you own that building.
Yes.
He also owns the building, do you know what I'm saying? And for this, right now, this is the store out of all the ones we've actually aged down Poplar Grove, that we have a community situation.
When did you purchase the property?
I'm not exactly sure, maybe 2005.
Okay.
Like June, somewhere there.
Okay.
And no matter, just like I said, my community, and I actually walked around and got all of this. This is 1,050 people that actually signed this thing. And that's like I said, all those stores that I actually even said something about, all of these signatures is 1,050 in these heads.
Mr. Chairman, if I can interject real quickly, and this is for everyone's benefit. The letters that you all received at the very bottom had a note that there was a contact at the Baltimore Development Corporation, BDC.
Yes.
That would be a great agency to reach out to and say, this is our situation, please give us some help. So you were asking about that. This board has no authority to do that, but BDC does. So that would be one option for you to go down.
If you want us to make those signatures part of the record, you can hand it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That was it, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you. Next case is 1419 Bank Street, Bernard H. and Deborah Key. Hi, how are you?
My name is Seho Key. I'm the son of Bernard Key and my mom, Deborah Key. And we'd like to thank you for hearing our case
Okay.
for hardship.
Sir, your name?
Bart Amadeo. I'm the opposing.
Let me just get this one. I don't have your name at all, sir. Say Yoki, you have to spell it.
It's SEHO.
K-E-E.
Yes.
And what was your name, sir?
Bart. His last name's Amadeo, A-M-O-D-E-O.
Okay, let's get everyone who's going to provide testimony sworn in.
Okay.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're
Deborah
about to give?
Key.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Key, you heard the criteria. There's three things that you have to find one of the three for us. Otherwise, we have no authority here.
Okay.
Yeah. My husband, passed away, yeah.
In May, so it's kind of like
Yeah.
we're kind of.
My name, I'm old.
I know my mom's 78, and she and I help run the business, and it's
Yeah.
like
We got the
we
business.
kind of request for extension because it's kind of hard to make a decision about converting the business or selling the property, or it's just we've been here at this property since 1996, and we're conscientious and diligent about paying our taxes and our permits and our fees and all that, and
No,
You
no
know,
violation,
We
yeah.
haven't had any liquor violations, and, it's been, it's been kind of rough having a business in inner city, but I think we pretty much get along with the neighbors, and, we're near Perkins Home. They have a big development, plan, I guess for the federal government with the grant. And we're near Eastern Avenue, which is a pretty bustling area, and then we got Harbor East in that area, and I have a big gripe about this law which was, voted on by the city council, and it was basically this whole cookie cutter legislation that was voted on, and all these stores is affected because of this legislation, and the city council, they don't know about the intended consequences. They know they wanted to reduce the alcohol hazards, but they're kind of short-sighted about what the ramifications for the business owners. And like the previous complaint, they said they're losing all these stores and businesses, and that's a pretty large, disruption and all
so
that.
old.
Sir, I hear what you're saying, but unfortunately, our hands are tied. If we need you to prove to us that you fall into one of those three situations that I outlined.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we might need to postpone it or something.
Would you like to postpone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, we're going to postpone.
I don't get to say anything.
If you'd like to say something, and again, it's, if you can, we have three criteria. That's all we want to hear about.
Okay. Well, I guess they're going to let me know when they're going to reschedule, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
because I would like to be here for that.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, 1419 Bank Street is postponed.
Okay, thanks.
1616 East Oliver Street, Herman Lawrence Jr. Good afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen of the,
Afternoon.
Good.
I'm here, for the record, Herman Lawrence here on behalf of Jaffe LLC and its owner, Mr. John Faulkner, who's to my immediate right. We're going to request a postponement of this hearing at this time.
Okay. 1616 East Oliver Street is postponed.
Thank you.
Thank you. 1642 North Wolf Street, Solomon Asfar.
One more time, I didn't get a track started in time.
Oh, 1642 North Wolf Street, Solomon Ashfar.
Yes.
Sir, would you state your name for the record, please?
Yeah, can you give me a chance to postpone? Because
Would you
I'm
like to
not ready.
postpone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I am not ready, because I didn't understand that the case is.
Okay. 1642 North Wolf Street is postponed. Thank you. And 3000 Windsor Avenue, Chong Yong Huang. Calling again, 3000 Windsor Avenue. Okay. All right, so next we're going to go to cases for which zoning board has reviewed the file, and we believe we have sufficient information to support the appeal. I'm going to call a number of cases. I would ask you all to come up at once, starting on my left and line up to my left. And, let me get my list. First case is 2018-269, 1843 West Lexington Street, Lisa Stakora. Next case is 2017-270, 4700 to 4702 Eastern Avenue, Jose Zebri. Next case is 2018-272, 719 South Port Street, Ian Wall. Twenty 276, 2200 St. Paul Street, Valerie St. Armand. And finally, I'm going to call two together, 2018-289 and 2018-270, 700 to 718 East Chase Street, 1108 to 1128 Proctor Street, 1101 to 1125 Proctor Street, and portions of street and alleys, and 1101 to 1111 Greenmount Avenue, all Ryan Potter. All right, let's get everyone sworn in who's going to provide testimony.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Affirm.
Great. First case, 2018-269, 1843 West Lexington Street. Who's here to provide testimony?
Bob Rosenfeld and Lisa Statura.
Great. Do we have any staff reports?
Planning has no objection.
Okay. Mr. Rosenfeld, is there anything you'd like to add to the record?
No, not at this
Great.
time.
Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, we have sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you. 2017-270, 4700 to 4702 Eastern Avenue.
For the record, Melvin J. Kaninsky for the appellant in this case.
Mr. Kudinski, Mr. Tizo, anything or any staff reports?
No objection from planning.
Okay.
I have nothing further to add.
Okay. Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, we find we have sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you very much. 719 South Porch Street, Ian Wall.
Yes.
State your name, please.
Ian Wall.
Great. Any staff reports?
Nothing in this one.
Great. Mr. Wall, we believe we have sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. 2018-276, 2200 St. Paul Street, Valerie St. Armand.
Yes, Valerie St. Amand.
Great, thank you. Any staff reports?
Department of Planning recommends approval of the application subject to the condition that all exterior changes, including additions, demolitions, alterations, and signage, are completed in accordance with an authorization to proceed issued by the Commission for Historic and Architectural Preservation, or CHAP.
Great, thank you. And do you understand and agree with those conditions?
Yes.
Great. With that, Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, we believe we have sufficient information to approve your appeal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And finally, 2018-289 through 2018-290. I'm not going to read the list of cases again. Ryan Potter.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Ryan Potter on behalf of Rebuild Metro.
Great. Any staff reports?
Planning recommends approval subject to the condition that the proposed redevelopment of the property is completed in accordance with site and development plans approved by Department of Planning.
Great. And Mr. Potter, are those plans acceptable to you?
They are, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Zoning Board, having reviewed your appeal, believe we have sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just a memorandum in support of our request from Susan Williams at STV.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to move back to our regular docket. And we're going to call 5 cases together: 2018-46, 2018-47, 2018-48, 2018-49, 2018-50, 2000 through 2008 McElderry Street.
Good afternoon. Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg, Martin, Greenberg. On behalf of the applicant, I'm joined by my colleague, Justin Williams, who's handing out folders with some exhibits that we'll walk through. And I'm also joined by Elizabeth Blair of the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. So this is an application, it's five separate applications for 5 adjacent properties located on McElderry
Let me see if we have any staff reports before you start. Thank you.
We do, Mr. Chair. We have 7 letters of support from neighbors in the surrounding blocks. And then we also have a letter from another neighbor at 2010 Park Avenue who originally had submitted a letter of opposition, but who has since changed his testimony and says that it is because of a very positive meeting with Elizabeth Blair from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and Caroline Hecker Council, as well as Councilwoman Sharon Sneed, who was at the meeting, but does have a request that if approved, attached language that would make it clear that any further property acquisitions in the 2000 block of McElderry Street and 600 block of North Castle Street by Johns Hopkins, his affiliates and parties support for the provide independent third-party legal and real property support for the impacted owners at the expense of Johns Hopkins. In other words, let that individual know if there are any other acquisitions in the neighboring surrounding areas.
Great. Anything else?
Mr. Chair, in each of these 5 cases, planning has no objection.
Okay. And ma'am, will you be providing testimony?
I was planning to proffer the
That's fine.
testimony unless
Fine.
you have an objection.
That's fine.
So as I said, this is 5 cases that are they all have exactly the same legal issue. They're all conditional use applications for use of the properties as a post-secondary educational institution, namely the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. The properties are 2000, 2008 McElderry Street. They're located across the street from the School of Public Health's main building. And they're all currently zoned R8. They're all old row houses that have most recently been used as the McElderry Lodging. It was a facility for short-term rentals for people visiting the hospital for use of patients' families and the like. They are located directly across Washington Street from the main School of Public Health building, and you'll see in the file that Mr. Williams handed out, there's a campus map that shows where the School of Public Health building is located, and you'll see directly across Washington Street at the intersection of Washington and McElderry is where these properties are located. There's also an aerial photo in the file which makes it a little clearer where the properties are located relative to the School of Public Health, which is the large building that you see on the opposite side of Washington Street. What we're proposing to do is to use the properties, as I said, as part of the School of Public Health. They'll be for some type of office research type use. The specific use hasn't been determined yet, but it'll be folks who are already working with the School of Public Health who are going to be relocated to this space because their existing facilities really are overcrowded. We're not planning to make any exterior changes to the properties. They're proposed to remain on the exterior exactly the same, and we'll fit out the inside with office uses. And there are floor plans that you'll see in the file that show the proposed layout of each of the buildings with the proposed office space. We have had an extensive amount of community outreach as part of this. You'll note that this has been postponed 4 times now. This is the 5th date that we've been scheduled for a hearing now, which has allowed us to do quite a bit of community outreach. And we have a few folks from the neighborhood who are here today as well. Mr. Sarai and Ms. Shepler, who we've met with a couple of times about the project. And as part of these community discussions, we've agreed to do a handful of things in the event that this application is approved. We've agreed that there will be no face-to-face interaction with research study participants at this location. We're not going to have folks coming here to participate in studies through the School of Public Health. There may be analysis of data that's collected elsewhere that occurs here, but they're not going to have study participants coming to this location. In addition, we've agreed that we will do sidewalk and curb trash collection along the 2000 block of McElderry Street on our side, the even side. We'll do snow and ice removal from the sidewalks. With the owner's written permission, we will landscape the tree pits along that side of the street to include a consistent tree pit design. We'll be planting trees on a vacant lot in the 600 block of North Castle Street to make up for any trees that we remove in the rear of these properties. We're going to investigate creating parking pads in the rear to add additional parking for the use of these buildings. But that parking will be done with pervious surfaces to not increase the amount of impervious area in the area. And we're not going to be doing the standard blue line painting that Hopkins often does around its facilities on this block. We'll keep it sort of residential looking in character. And in addition, I think, which is reflected in the letter that Mr. Barb read, there was a concern raised about Hopkins interfering in the free market sale of properties in the neighborhood. There's appears to be a perception that Hopkins is going out and seeking properties in the residential area to acquire, and we just want to state on the record that Hopkins and School of Public Health specifically are not going to use any type of political pressure to engage the city in any eminent domain proceedings. Our plan is to let any properties that come up for sale do so on the open market and not to interfere in that in any way. And I think that's reflected by the fact that we have a series of letters of support in the file, which we've also provided copies of, but Mr. Barb mentioned earlier that there are a series of letters of support in our file, and again, we have a couple of our neighbors here as well in support of the application. In the file that we've handed out, goes through an outline with the conditional use standards that the board is required to consider. I would proffer those for the board's consideration. Generally, the standard is the Schultz versus Pritt standard are the inherent adverse impacts of the proposed use worse at this location than they would be elsewhere in the zone. And here the answer to that is clearly no. Having the School of Public Health right next door makes this a logical place for their expansion. Hopkins has a great reputation for keeping its property secure and clean. In addition, the removal of the sort of transient housing in that area will provide an additional level of security for the neighbors who will begin to see regular people coming in, the same crowd of people coming and going for use of the properties. And in addition, because Hopkins already has a tremendous amount of off-street parking available through its garages, which are shown on the campus map that you have in your file, there's no likely impact on off-street parking by these uses because their employees will continue to park in the Hopkins parking garages. So with that, I would proffer the legal standards that are included in the outline, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have, but we request that the board approve the conditional use of the properties for the post-secondary educational facility.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board? No. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, next case is 2018-271, 601 West Patapsco Avenue, Joseph Woolman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon. Mr. Woolman, we have this to use portions of the premises for temporary storage of used and damaged operable and inoperable automobiles, trucks, and other vehicles, trailers, and construction equipment for wholesale online auctions.
Rather lengthy description.
Somewhat.
Which leads me to my statement regarding the case. And good afternoon, for the record, Joseph Woolman on behalf of the applicant. It's a somewhat unusual request. I'm sure it's
Get started. Do we have any
gathered.
staff reports?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I had some questions as part of the presentation, so if Mr. Wallman would like to go first, then we can have a little bit of
Okay.
discussion.
Mr. Barr, do we have any staff reports other than planning?
Yes, sir.
As I indicated, this is somewhat of an unusual request in the sense, as you know, we've got a new zoning code that's only been around for a little over a year, and while everyone attempted to capture every possible use, that's an impossible thing to do. And this particular use, as you just described, as you recited our application, is fairly specific. We could not find any use within the code that specifically permits this use, nor could we find anything in the code that specifically prohibits this use. For that reason, we met with the zoning administrator on a couple of occasions and discussed with him the use situation. He felt more comfortable with sending the matter to the board so the board could define the use, if you will, regarding the request. Basically, what we have here is, as opposed to your typical case where the zoning administrator has denied an application because a use is not permitted, in this sense, he has somewhat denied or deferred our request because the use is not defined. So it's that type of request. We do have a board showing you the property in question, along with an aerial photograph. It's an incredibly large piece of land that straddles the city and county line. You can see there are current outdoor storage uses on the property. My client is a company called Copart. It's a very large national company that has a proprietary technology for online auto auctions. This is what they call a sublot, and that's why the word temporary is listed in our application. They work extensively with insurance companies, cars that are involved in accidents, et cetera. And cars are temporarily stored here, and their technology allows for an online review of their inventory. When the vehicle is purchased, it is eventually moved to what they call a principal facility. So the word temporary really does apply here, and that's important because we do not, and I've discussed this with Mr. Tizo, we do not want to be considered a junkyard for various reasons, and we would submit that we are not. Mr. Tizo and I, unfortunately, missed each other the last couple of weeks. He's very busy covering for Mr. French, and we tried to get a hold of each other, but weren't able to speak until just about an hour or so ago. And he had some questions, which I'm sure he'll share with the board regarding the temporary nature of the quote-unquote storage, I've also discussed it with zoning staff and again with Mr. Veal. The one thing I would submit is when you don't have a defined use in the code, and we're asking you to define it as permitted, it helps to look at what is allowed in that zone, and this is an I-2 industrial zone, and I'll note that outdoor storage yards generally are permitted in an I-2 zone, and I'll quickly just cite the zoning code real quick regarding that definition. Outdoor storage yard in general means a lot, the principal or accessory use of which is the storage other than within an enclosed building of any material for longer than 24 hours. And in trying to answer Mr. Tizo's questions today, I was able to get a hold of an executive up in Connecticut at Copart who further explained to me the temporary nature of this use, and I would proffer that at this time, and that is that, again, these vehicles are brought there, they're stored there, they're inventoried, however they work this online magic, I don't know, but they're put online and bids are made and they are eventually moved to this principal lot. I asked what's the typical time period that the vehicles are there, and he said it averages around 60 days is what he told me, and I explained that to Mr. Tizo. I'm hoping that mollified the majority of his concerns.
So are you taking a position that you're asking for approval as a storage yard? I'm going to put the burden on you to tell us under which provision of the code you want us to consider.
I think based on all the conversations I had with Mr. Veal and based on the nature of our requests, and I don't know if this has come before you yet or not, but to do the best service for my client, I would ask that the board consider the use as we've defined it as not being defined in the code, but permitted based on our application and our explanation of the use. Again, they're spending a significant amount of resources, obviously buying a very, very large parcel of land, and we're just trying to make sure that something does not come back later down the road from a use standpoint that violates them. And I know Mr. Tizo has certain conditions that he wants to explain to the board as well for the planning department.
So for Department of Planning, our principal concern and to share with the board to hopefully guide your decision is a predominant portion of this property happens to be located in the critical area. In 2011, you saw a case before you for a recycling type use which had some outdoor storage. So we would advise that this may need to go to the Critical Area Commission at the state level for their review and approval, which takes a bit of time to do. Depending on how the board wants to call this use may impact your decision. So it's not really motor vehicle sales in the traditional sense, which would not be permitted in the I-2 district because we wanted to have that a place where things are manufactured and not allow the incursion of retail. This is more of a storage type use, but may not cleanly fall under that definition either. So long as this is not construed in any way to be a junkyard, not like a pick and pull type thing, as long as entire vehicles are brought in, moved elsewhere, and sold elsewhere, I believe that would avoid that determination because junkyards and scrap facilities are not permitted in the critical area. So with those offers of suggestion, I just wanted to offer that. We don't have a particularly firm position in one way or another depending on the outcome of the board's decision, other than to advise that the Critical Area Commission and our sustainability staff may need to review the plans.
And I would just mention two things for the record. One, that we are working with an environmental consultant who's working with the state and the critical area issues, and obviously we understand the planning department's concerns regarding those issues, and we certainly plan to address anything pertaining to the state process. I'd also mention for the record that we did meet with Councilman Reisinger. This is in his district. My understanding after meeting with him late last week that he was going to be contacting the board with an email or letter of support, but I believe that may not have been received.
Doesn't appear that it has.
So I would proffer in light of no opposition that we did have that meeting with the councilman, and he supports the proposal.
The only concern I have is, not the only concern, but a concern that I have is you're not coming to us with a proposed use. You're coming to us with a proposed use, but it's not a defined proposed use as defined in the code. Or at least you're wanting us to sort of try to fit what you want into something into the code. And I guess, as I said, I'd like to put the burden on you to tell us where you believe it fits in the code.
Well, again, and we had a lot of back and forth with the zoning administrator about that very question, and obviously it's his prerogative to send us here if he wants to, so lucky you guys. And I believe, and again, I don't know if it's come to you before, I'm assuming it will be in the future, there are going to be instances where a use as specific as this use is not defined in the code, and therefore it's incumbent upon us to come to you and ask that you look at the outdoor storage definition as a use that is permitted, that doesn't perhaps completely define this use and recognize that it's akin to this use, it's closely analogous to this use. But again, we are, to be perfectly frank, looking to dot our i's and cross our t's before this very large piece of land is purchased to make sure that we do not have an issue with the city down the road from a use perspective. So I understand the chairman's question regarding the nature of the request. That's why I said at the outset it is somewhat unusual. I'm not sure where the zoning administrator left us in terms of what we could do at that point, but to come to you and ask for this approval so that we have that on the record down the road in case anybody did question the use permit for the site.
Mr. Chairman, we pointed out in our staff report that one of the uses that's permitted by right in this district is a wholesale goods establishment. I mean, wholesale goods is not exactly a perfect fit either, but the definition says wholesale goods establishment means a facility primarily engaged in selling or distributing merchandise to retailers, to industrial, commercial, institutional, or professional business users, or to other wholesalers, or, including in the inclusions, includes the following accessory uses: a showroom for the display of items stored on site, and retail sales to the public. So again, it's not a perfect fit, but it's another option if the board wanted to
And I
use something
appreciate
like
that from Mr. Baumgartner.
Let me
That's
ask
a
you,
great assistance.
use of the word wholesale, do retail customers have the ability to bid on these items?
Retail customers do not have the ability to come to this site and bid on this item. The public can go online, but they do, I think the majority, frankly, although I don't want to state that as an absolute, I believe from my conference calls with the company, the majority of their business is with wholesalers.
But
I
a
think
retail user could bid online, you believe?
I believe they can, yes. And perhaps, given Mr. Baumgartner's suggestion, a hybrid of the two uses as defined combined would be something perhaps that the board could consider regarding granting of the request.
Question?
Sure.
Derek?
Yes, sir.
How is the city's abandoned vehicle lot on Route 40 listed in the code, or is it?
I do not know. A lot of the abandoned car lots, we can say, are junkyards. A lot of them are non-conforming uses. So they, as long as they continue to operate legally, they can continue to exist so long as they abide by critical area rules and regulations. I don't know about that property specifically, but we can certainly look into it.
Yeah, I was asking because it is storage, and they also conduct on-site auctions.
Yeah, there's been a significant amount of work over the decades in regulating junkyards, scrapyards, that type of use, specifically in critical area properties because they drain directly into Chesapeake Bay. And a lot of the work that's been done is, at least from my experience, they were non-conforming uses and were allowed to continue to operate, again, so long as they stayed in continued operation and they stayed in compliance with all state laws. But again, I'd have to check into that particular lot to get an answer for that use.
Okay, any other questions from the board? No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tiza.
Okay, next case is 2018-273, 118 East 24th Street, Carl Nunn. Calling again, 2018-273, 118 East 24th Street. Okay, next we're going to call two together, 2018-277, 3550 Ash Street, and 2018-278, 3600 Ash Street. Robert Rosenfeld. I think I need to, you've been sworn in, I believe. May I need to get you sworn in?
Swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Great. Do we have any staff reports?
I have one letter from Hamden Community Council, signed by their president, Mr. Matthew Stegman. Reads, I write on behalf of the Hamden Community Council, which represents the Hamden community at large, to express our strong opposition to requests to subdivide properties located at this address. We believe that the plans presented by the developer to construct 5 single-family homes on these parcels will exacerbate parking and traffic concerns in the southwest corner of the neighborhood. Further, the developer's proposed curb cuts along Ash Street would set a bad urban design precedent for our historic community.
Great, thank you. Mr. Rosenfeld, does planning have a report?
Yes, sir. In both of these cases, we recommend that approval of the application be subject to the condition that all improvements are completed in accordance with the subdivision plan and development plan that may be approved by the planning commission. I also reviewed this case as the chair of the site plan review committee, in case that's helpful.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I also reviewed this development as the chair of the site plan review committee, if that will help in response to some of the community's concerns.
Okay, and Mr. Rosenfeld, you've heard the conditions. Is your client okay with those?
Yes, he is.
So, well, did you want to at least describe the project, and I can assist where needed?
Yeah, so basically what we're talking about here are 2 separate projects, 2 separate lots, one which we're going to develop into 3 townhouses, which are lots 1, 2, and 3, which is really 3600 Ash Street now, and also 3550 Ash Street, just to the south of it, on the other side of a paper street, of paper 36th Street, that will become 2 semi-detached, or 1 semi-detached of 2 units, however you want to define it. Just in responding to the issue of the parking on the 3 townhouse units at 3600 Ash Street, there is a fire hydrant in front of the property, kind of splitting where the units will go. And on either side of that hydrant, there is a 15-foot no parking zone because of the fire hydrant. So essentially, the entire frontage of where the 3 townhouses will be, there's no parking anyway. So that kind of obviates a concern about we're taking away parking. So there's a no parking zone, there's a fire hydrant there, site plan review has approved it. Go ahead.
Well,
Speak up.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Carla Ryan, also with Colbert Metz Rosenfeld. I also wanted to add that we are providing 1 parking space in a garage, so we're not asking for a parking variance here. We're providing the required parking.
Spell your first name.
C-A-R-L-A.
So each townhome would have a parking spot?
It has a garage.
Garage.
Yep.
Hold on one second. Mr. Cunningham,
Did you have opposition to this?
Yes, sir. I didn't officially sign in because I didn't know how to do that, but.
if you want to come up, come on up. And we'll get you sworn in.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear?
Ma'am, if you can come around this side. Great, thank you.
The move, I'm sorry.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay.
Nell Fultz, Nellfultz.
Okay, you can continue.
I just wanted to add that we're not actually requesting a parking variance here. We are providing the required parking.
Okay. Tell us your opposition.
Yeah, I'm a neighbor, and I just kind of speak on behalf of the lower West Hamden neighbors that live around there. And first, I would disagree with what you were saying, that it would alleviate parking. You used a better word than that. It would alleviate parking concerns, because it wouldn't, because because they couldn't park there, they'd have to park elsewhere. And most households are not a 1-car household, and parking there is already packed to the gills. And a school just opened that took away about 6 parking spots on Berry Street, which is the next street down there. And the type of housing that is proposed is, it wasn't entirely clear to me what type of housing it was going to be, but we want to encourage housing that is within the affordability range of families that might send their children to the schools in the new Robert Poole building, which is feet away from where these will be. And so we just ask you to keep that in mind as you work on your development.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you like to add anything?
Nothing to add.
So to add, in our review of this development, the Site Plan Review Committee is an interagency group that reviews practical development. The purpose of that is to give the applicants the benefit of our best advice at the concept phase of the plan before they get too far along. Also, one thing that we do is we review appeals to curb cut permits that are disapproved. As part of our discussion on these projects was initially there was a broader curb cut for each of these that were proposed, and we requested that be reduced. Given that the street, the paper street in between them, the extension of 36th Street, is quite steep and is just that, it's undeveloped. It's not possible to gain access to the rears of these property, which would be our first choice to get to the back of the property, and if that's not possible, at least to have a side entry. So since that is precluded, the only option to meet the requirements to provide the parking is from the front.
So the alley that's shown here is paper as well?
It is.
Yeah.
So the challenge then becomes, okay, if they don't have any other access, they're either coming to you to request a parking variance, or they're coming to you with the proposal that you see. So with a fire hydrant being placed in front of the three attached homes, if that is to be daylighted to get access to it, there's 15 feet either side of it that is not valid for parking anyway. In some neighborhoods, sometimes it's not well enforced, but if something happens, that can be a problem for the fire department. So that really takes out that half of it. For the two semis that are there, the curb cut is reduced and shared to have a net gain which meets the requirements of the curb cut policy for the city. So I think, at least in our committee's review, why we were able to grant approval is this is the minimum impact that can be done to provide the parking that is required by zoning and to minimize the impact to the neighborhood surrounding it, which is what led us to approve it. Now, again, this will have to go through the Planning Commission's public hearing process as a part of the subdivision, so even downstream of the board, this is just part one of the step. It'll need to go in front of the Planning Commission, which looks at broader design issues, which includes your review for zoning, but beyond that, the design generally.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I'm good.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Anything she wants to say?
Is there anything, ma'am, that you'd like to add?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next case is 2018-279, 1001, 1003, 1005, and 1007 North Dukeland Street. Nate Prettle. Okay, let's get everybody sworn in who's going to provide testimony.
Raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
You're not Mr. Prettle?
I'm not Mr. Prettle. I'm standing in for Mr. Prettle today. Alfred W. Barry, planning consultant for the applicants.
Mr. Berry, tell us what you want to do here.
Okay, well, this is a long story that you're going to hear about. I know it's the last item on your agenda, but it's an interesting story in that it concerns several city-owned properties that the Folkses have been in negotiation with to buy from the city for about 3 years, at least. That's when I got involved. And at the time, it started out, if you look at your site plans as well as any aerial photographs, you'll notice several things. There's a vacant interior lot, which started all this, that's in green, behind the Dukeland Street properties, again, 4 of which were owned by the city. And this started out originally 3 years ago when the Folkses were going to buy that vacant lot to build a community center and daycare center that was going to front on Ashburton Street. This is to the opposite side. It's on your aerial photograph. It's not on the site plan. And in the course of that discussion about the best way to lay out this community center, it was thought that a Dukeland Street address would be better for several reasons. One, all the properties, row houses, were either abandoned, vacant, and were a real neighborhood nuisance. So we worked with the Department of Real Estate and Housing and Community Development to acquire those properties, and due to various liens that were basically ground rents and other, it took 2 years almost to get through the court system to get clear title so we could have this application before you today. I want to have Dr. Denise Folks and her husband Victor Folks give you, and they have some information if you could hand out that describes their existing program in West Baltimore, which is exemplary. And also, we can respond once you talk about planning department's recommendations on this. We've tried to meet with Mr. French and Mr. Tizo about their recommendations, and we're prepared to discuss one of them with you today as to why it's probably unnecessary, but we'll get to that once he gets into his own testimony.
And I will say, I neglected to ask for staff reports, so let me ask for staff reports now.
Planning recommends approval, subject to the condition that the proposed redevelopment of the property be completed in accordance with site and development plans approved by the Department of Planning. Principally, our concern was with drop-off and pickup of children up to 60.
Okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So just speaking to that, before we give a brief presentation about the program, this is a walk-in facility essentially for the neighborhood. So the issue of drop-off and the idea of widening alleys for that, which would be an unnecessary expense, and frankly would get to a point where the grades do not work. This site drops almost 10 or more feet from Dukeland Street to Ashburton, and so having it on Dukeland allows handicap access directly. But as I said, this is primarily a walk-to facility. Just briefly, if Dr. Denise Folks could describe the program, and then maybe if you have any questions about it.
Okay. I'm Denise Folks, founder of Positive Youth Expression Educational Institute. It was founded in 1993, so we're celebrating 25 years in October. We've already implemented a child care center in Southwest Baltimore City, and that's been running since 2002. A lot of people come across Warwick Street to get to the center or in Southwest Baltimore, and they desire a child care center in West Baltimore off of Dukeland and Ashburton area. So the center will not only provide activities for children 0 to 5 years old, but it will also provide programs for after-school program, before-after-school program, and also summer enrichment program, which we're already implementing and planning now. It will also provide jobs for those students graduating from Carver High School coming into the child care field. We already have some of those students in our program now. We also work with the Youth Works program, training young people. So we've been doing this for 25 years. We're part of Maryland State Department of Education Excels program. We're a licensed facility, and we actually go all the way up to grade 8. But in that facility, it will be grades 0 to 5, and then before and after school program, the summer program, and any after-school programs. So we've been doing it for a while.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we passed out some letters of support, and we have some neighborhood residents, if they want to say, or raise your hand if you have any, you're in support. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Watts, and I have lived in this vicinity for 67 years. We have unfortunately seen this vicinity hit the bottom, the pure bottom. When we first moved in there, it was gorgeous. Then gradually, as the elderly ones died, the area hit the bottom. I prayed that something would happen to bring the area back up again. And through God, Dr. Folks and Reverend Folks came into the area. They have done so much. It's unbelievable how much better the area looks. Our kids in the area desperately needs help. They don't have the help and assistance from the parents and all that they need. What Dr. Folks and Reverend Folks is offering will help the kids and protect the kids, because these are our kids of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. I certainly could say, just say, ditto to what's already been said. I certainly agree. I've lived in the neighborhood also for 60-some years, maybe around 64 years. And actually, it's gone down, as has already been said. So when Victor and Dr. Folks, Dr. Victor and Denise Folks, when they came into the area and purchased some property and came up with the idea of the school, I think was a great idea. Not only was it a great idea, we've seen the benefits of it. It's already been said again. We've seen she's beautified one area there, put a mural up, and also a little statuette in the area, and it's right now it's fenced in, and things have just gotten better as far as the lot is concerned. And her proposed idea, or their proposed idea, I should say, has been a wonderful one. I also can speak in behalf of the umbrella group, ALCO, which is Alliance of Rosemont and Community Organizations, and they also stand behind this project. It's a much-needed one, and we're hoping that it would bring our neighborhood, I'll say, up to standard. Certainly, it can't do anything in detriment, so it would certainly have to be an asset. So we're wholeheartedly in agreement with this project being approved.
Great, thank you very much.
Name, sir? Horace Love.
I have nothing further unless certainly this is a conditional use applications of the board. I think you've heard just from neighbors, and I can certainly go through each item that this is consistent with the city's goal. It's taking basically city abandoned properties and putting them to productive use, serving an immediate neighborhood, and I would ask the board to approve it today.
Great. Any questions from the board?
Mr. Barry?
Just
Go ahead,
one.
after you.
How many employees do you anticipate having?
Well, at this time, I have 15 employees at one of the first center that we opened on Bentlow Street. I'm anticipating 15 more employees. Thank you.
That was my question. Also, the expected number of kids to be served there. I mean, 10 kids, 50
Child care
kids.
center, we're expecting 40 children.
Okay. Thank you.
And just for the record, if you're not familiar with Dukeland Street or this immediate area, obviously we do not want to provide a amount of parking which is unnecessary for either the people visiting the facility and take away from the green space. The green space, we have some limited parking. We don't want to get too much because of stormwater management costs, but we also want to have the majority of that space be used for outdoor activities for the center itself. Any number of times I've been to the site during the course of meetings over it. There is an abundance of street parking. Maybe the neighborhood could talk about that. That's available, and to pave over more green space for unnecessary parking, I think would be a mistake. They want to say anything or confirm that, that'd be fine. But I ask you, the board, to approve this today and let them, after 3 years, get a great program off to a good start.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And we are finished and off the record.